Hello everybody, this is week 11. Here's Kabawi. I'm gonna be doing a demo on some particle things you can do today. I'm gonna have two different lessons for particles. So this one's gonna be about placing objects with particles and then doing like rain or snow. So this will be pretty quick. And this is what we're gonna make. So one of the handy things with particles is if you need to just like place a bunch of objects in your scene kind of randomly rather than having to like duplicate it on your own, you can use particles. So first thing I'm going to do is just put in a plane to be my ground. And then I have a couple objects that I'm using as the things I want to duplicate. So let me actually pull this in poly. I just have these two planes. Each one you can see has a different grass material on it. And then I also have this stone. When you're doing this, keep in mind that you're going to be making a lot of these objects, so try to keep them as low poly as possible. So I have a pretty low poly stone, and then the grass is just this one plane. But to actually apply this, we're going to click on our plane, and actually let me label this because I'm going to get confused in a second. So I have my ground, and then we can either go to the modifier section and put in a particle system, or there is its own particle properties tab. So similar to like all the physics, it has its own tab. And in that tab you can add one. I'm going to call this grass. And you can see we either have an emitter or hair to use. So default is just this emitter that makes these bouncy balls. If I rendered this, I wouldn't actually see anything because this is just like a placeholder. But for placing stuff, I want to use hair. Emitter will be what we use for rain. Hair can actually place stuff on the surface. So I'm going to click on hair. And you can see if you actually do want to do hair, here's beautiful hair. I'm not going to get into the options for those though, because you can like brush it and style it and everything. So rather than showing hair, I want to show my grass. So to do that, I'm going to go down to the render segment of my particle properties, change it from render as to either object or collection. If you just want it to be one object, you're going to choose object and then use that dropper bottle and pick your object. But if you have a few versions of an object that you want, so there's a little bit more variety, so I have two types of grass, I'm going to choose collection. So in my outliner, top right, you can see I made a collection. To make a new collection, if you hit right click in your outliner, you could do new collection. Or it is like this little like box icon that's in the very top right. You can also do new collection, and then I just dragged and dropped my two different grass in there. So if I do render as collection, I can choose which collection to pull from, and now it's going to have a mix of both those styles of grass. So I have the fluffy topped grass and then just like the tufts of grass. One thing I already fixed on mine that some of you are probably going to have issues with is your object might be being sliced in half, and that's because it's placing your object at the center point. So that yellow dot that's like on all of your objects, I already moved mine. So let me move it back before I explain this to show like what I mean. So this is probably what yours looks like, is where you have like chopped in half grass. So to fix that, it's really simple. You're going to click on the object, and then the very top right of your viewport, where it says options, you want to check mark origins, and now if I hit a basic transformation tool like G, it's only going to move that origin. So I can do G and then Z and move it down so that it actually is coming from the ground rather than being like spliced in half by the ground. Make sure you just uncheck that once you're done so that you can do transformations as usual. So now we have our grass. We have a few different options to add a little bit more variety to this. So to change the scale, you could either play around with the hair length or scale that's under the like collection we chose. So you can make that larger, smaller. And then you also have scale randomness. So this will add even more variety. Scale randomness of 0 means there's no randomness. 1 means it's like fully random from like very extremely small grass to the full size. So you can see I have like really baby grass in here. So a fraction of this will just make it so it can't go so small. I think I'll do that. And then one other thing you might notice, all of my grass is just like lined up in a row. So I want to add some like randomness to the rotation. And there isn't actually any section as is in our particle properties, but if we hit that advanced button, so the very top of your particle properties, if you check mark advanced, it will give you a rotation tab. So I'm going to tab that, check mark it, and then you want to play around with the randomize phase and the phase for like determine what rotation you're at. So now you can see I have some rotated grass. And one thing I skipped over is the number. This is going to be how many planes it makes. So if I just do 20, you can see it's very sparse. Be careful with this because you are making that amount of versions of your item. So this is why you want to try to keep it low poly, because if you have a large number, to make it look like a nice meadow, it's gonna be a lot of brain power for your computer. I'll keep it at 2000. So we have a nice grassy field, but say you wanted to kind of designate where your grass is. So on this like reference one I kind of have it more sparse in some areas and a little bit more dense in spots. So this is where weight painting is going to come into play. And actually I want to make this bigger, just bigger grass. What have I done? I forgot I can hold down shift. Sorry everyone, sorry for that. Okay, so I want to kind of pick and choose where my grass will be laying. So if you hit tab on your object, you can toggle between object or edit mode so that top left drop down's changing. But if I click on that drop down, you can see there's a weight paint setting. It has a little dumbbell that's painting. So I'm going to click on this. It's going to just have blue show up. So we can use the gradient, do a large amount at once. We have the paintbrush as well, and you can see we can change the weight from 1 to 0. So 1 will give you more red tones, 0 is going to give you more blue. And so I'm running into an issue right now where it's not really reacting, and that's because I didn't subdivide my plane. So weight painting is going to be influenced by how subdivided your plane is, but again, make sure you don't do it too much so you don't have too many polys, so don't go insane, but watch it as I slowly keep clicking it. I'm probably fine with 7. So now if I go back to my weight painting, I should have, and this is really big. Yeah, I have a little bit more refined control, you can see. You'll see more when I choose red. So it's kind of determined by how many vertices you have, how like specific you can be with this. So again, large scale, you can do the gradient one and just like pull and drag, but then you can also use the paintbrush, change its weight, and either paint on red where it'll be more dense or blue where it'll be more sparse. And then we also have this blur tool that will help like fade between the two. So you can actually see my grass reacting already because I actually already applied it to troubleshoot some issues. I actually have this vertex group applied to my object. I hit assign. It should automatically make a group. You can label it if you want. So this would be my grass group. And then in my particle properties, you're going to go down to where it is vertex groups. And you're going to just, let me do before grass, after. You can see there's a few options. Density is usually going to be the one you want for object placement, just because it's going to be like how often it places that thing. Length is also handy because it kind of deals with scale. So if you need it to be like smaller to larger in any scenario, you would use the length. And let's look at this in the render view, if my computer can handle it. Back to object mode, please. There we go. So I'm actually going to just do density, but you can see how helpful that weight paint option is. And we also have a few modifiers that deal with weight painting specifically and have more procedural ways to generate those weight maps rather than you like painting it on, but the painting works fine. So we have our grass on. Say now we want to add the rock, but we don't want it to follow this weight paint effect that we did for the grass. We want to be like rocks everywhere. So to do that, we can just add a second particle group. And I just got paranoid that my thing isn't recording. It is. Okay, we're fine. So go to your particle properties menu, scroll to the top, and where it has your first group, you can hit that plus sign, and it's going to make a second squad. And again, we're placing, so we want hair. And in this case, I just want the rock, so I'm going to do render as object. And I can dropper bottle my rock. So there's so many rocks. We can reduce this number. And again, I had already adjusted the origin for my rock so that it lays more on the surface. I think it's it's rotated a little bit weird. So you can see my rocks like going upright. We can change that with our rotation properties in the particles menu. So actually let me play around with like the size first, because that's all right under your render. I want to randomize my scaling. And then I want that rotation option, so I'm going to hit the advanced checkmark tab box, checkmark rotation, and then to fix how the rock is laying, let me find one of the big ones so you can see it. I'm going to change the orientation axis. So you might need to like test around and hit a few of them. Seems that object Y is working fine. I'm sure global Y would also work because I haven't actually like changed anything. And then I can also do that phase and then random phase to do a little bit randomness in the rotation. So that's how you can use particles to place things. Again, just be careful the amount you place because you don't want to crash your computer. Oh, one thing I did skip over is the seed. This is just like what random placement Like it's just a designated number for a different random placement. So it's still like all the same settings, just replacing the rocks. So you might have a preferred seed for your rock placement. So that's how you place. Now I'm gonna do quick particles for some rain. So I'm gonna make a new plane. Let me go back to my shaded view. I'm gonna make a plane. Just raise it up here. Again, if I wanted to do a weight painting effect for this, I would want to subdivide this, but I don't need that for what I'm going to do with the rain. I'm going to do plus in my particle properties, and I'm going to keep it on emitter. When I hit play, you can see all the little balls rain down, and this is a placeholder, so if I went and rendered this, this wouldn't show up. So I need to actually put an object in for that render as. So I need to make a raindrop really quick, and I'm going to try to make a low poly one. Be careful when you're working with particles where you used a collection, and make sure you're not adding more things into that collection, because then it would be adding those objects you're spawning into like my grass fields. What does a raindrop look like? This is I need to be more stretched out. That's like a raindrop. Very low poly raindrop. So these are going to be really small. Sorry, I have like cat hair in my nose. I can do the shade smooth. Maybe that'll help it. And I could even put on a subdivision surface modifier. But try to keep it low poly, just because it's going to be so small and so many of them. But there's my raindrop. And now let me label it for my sanity. Rain 2. Rain to 2. And in my particle settings, oh my god, this cat hair is gonna drive me insane. I'm gonna go to render as an object. If I wanted like a snow ice rainstorm, I could maybe do a collection where I have a couple different objects. But I'm just doing rain. And now look at those massive raindrops. Raindrops keep falling and destroying. So we can scale it. We can add some randomness to the size of these raindrops. We could change the number of raindrops. This is like a very pleasant rain though. Let's try like 3,000. Again, be careful. This is 3,000 times however many polys that is. So careful. And then, I mean, I could have put a material. I just put the material on this one. Point at it. This one. And it'll spawn on all of these little guys. So I guess I can really quick just put like a blue material on it. Look, it's rain. And then you'll have little rendered raindrops. There are some like, I don't know what they're force settings you could play around with. Force fields. I'm not too familiar with them. I can try to learn them, but this would like affect your particles to like blow around and stuff. You could also change the intensity that this is shooting out the particles. So actually, if I rotate this and hit play, you can see the raindrops are just falling straight down. Oh my god, I'm doing this in render view. Risky business. But I can change the velocity of my raindrops. So let me put this up to 10 and then hit play. And you can see my raindrops just like shooting away. So the positive side of my normal is facing that way, so I actually want it to go the other way, so I could just do -10, and then it'll shoot it towards my grass. And now you can see it's kind of like falling at an angle now. How much time you have with this animation is how long your timeline is. If you have to change that, you can manually increase it. So this is like random tidbits that are coming up. But there are a ton of settings to play around with this. I'll try to link some helpful tutorials I've found. A lot of them are for working with like glowy lights and stuff. Next time we do particles, I'm going to show how you put like dust in the air, and then how you would make low poly, like low brain power steam and smoke, so that we don't have to actually use like the liquid smoke effects. It would just be using an alpha map that's being emitted. But for now, this is how you play stuff with particles, and then if you need anything emitting like rain, precipitating, that's how you use particles.